Good morning, everyone. My name is Surya Deva. I'm the current chair of the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights. It's my great pleasure to be able to talk to you virtually at this important event. Thank you very much for the invitation. I would also like to congratulate all the organizers for organizing this important event. This is definitely very crucial for Thailand and for this part of the region to learn from what Thailand government and SEC has been doing. In my remarks, I will talk about three aspects: the progress that we have made in relation to UN Guiding Principles implementation in the last 10 years. Then I will talk about the barriers and challenges that are faced in conducting human rights due diligence, especially in times of COVID. And finally, I will talk about where we should be going in terms of the future of BHR agenda and what should be the government of Thailand and other actors should be doing. So let me start with the first element, the progress so far. I would like to highlight, to begin with the common language. So UN Guiding Principles have provided a common language for all the stakeholders, whether these are governments, businesses, civil society actors, or other institutions, to work together around what are the expectations from the government, what are the expectations from the business. So who should do what is very clearly articulated. So there is no disagreement or discussion anymore about that. So I think that is quite a significant achievement because we're talking about the same language. The second is that in terms of the commitment to the UN Guiding Principles or the uptake of the UN Guiding Principles, I would say, is unprecedented. I'm not aware of any other soft standard of the United Nations that has received such a widespread uptake in such a short period of time, that is just 1 decade, 10 years, right? Of course, states and businesses have endorsed the UN Guiding Principles, but you can also see UN agencies, investors, the sports associations, universities, trade unions, human rights defenders, on almost every other institution is, and this list is expanding all the time. So that is in itself an achievement as well. The third factor that I would like to mention is national action plans. So the working group has recommended governments to adopt inclusive participatory process and develop national action plans to implement UN Guiding Principles. So far, we have 25 countries adopting standalone national action plans, and we also have at least 2 countries, South Korea and Georgia, that have a chapter as of now in their national action plans. But what is crucial here is that in the last some years, we also have these national action plans coming out of the Global South. The first plan from the Global South was from Colombia, that was 2015. But in the last couple of years, we have had 3 national action plans from Asia itself. It started with Thailand, then Japan and Pakistan more recently, and several other countries in Asia are in the process of developing a national action plan. We have now 2 national action plans in Africa, Kenya and Uganda, and we have 3 in Latin America like Chile, Peru and Colombia. So I think this is emerging to be more like a global picture. Otherwise, to begin with, it was more like Eurocentric evolution of national action plans. So this is definitely very much a welcome trend in my view. The fourth element that I would like to mention is that UN Guiding Principles are also influencing law and policy making in a number of regimes, whether it is about trade and investment agreements, whether it is about ESG disclosure or how companies listed on stock exchanges should conduct their businesses, or it is about mandatory human rights due diligence policies or legislation in Europe or elsewhere. UN Guiding Principles are definitely having a significant impact on that. Of course, Thailand has shown leadership in Asia in terms of adopting the National Action Plan. But I think the real challenge going forward is the pandemic, right? So how do we create an inclusive and sustainable economy because let us say tourism was a big factor for a country like Thailand, right? So how do you deal with this particular crisis when tourists are not able to come to Thailand, right? Is this a business and human rights issue? So for instance, I saw some pictures on social media where the taxi drivers were growing vegetables on the roof of taxis in Bangkok, right? Very colorful taxis in Bangkok, and they were trying to grow vegetables. So I think that is the innovation, right? So how do you adapt? Because the world is going to throw some new challenges, and everything will have some connection to business and human rights. So the challenge for government as well as businesses is to how to be innovative and resilient to overcome those challenges. And of course, the guiding principles provide some inspiration, some blueprint how this can be done. Now, let me move on to now the barriers to human rights due diligence. So human rights due diligence has become a lingua franca, as we call it, in the field of business and human rights, right? So how it is unfolding in practice. Of course, it is very nice and not very difficult for businesses to make a policy commitment, okay, that we respect UN guiding principles, we do due diligence, but are they doing that in practice, right? And how COVID pandemic has impacted their operationalization in practice, right? So I think there are serious challenges. Because when we talk about due diligence, we expect businesses to conduct it in consultation with the stakeholders, right? So how do you consult stakeholders effectively when you are not able to travel, when there are lockdowns or quarantine or other hygiene restrictions, right? So I think that is a big challenge. Many businesses rely on audits, social audits. Of course, social audits are problematic for different regions, but even if you try to do social audits, how do you do it? So some companies have started virtual audits, right? But then they create their own challenges in terms of privacy issue. How do you create a safe space to share information if there's some critical voices who would like to do that, right? So I think those issues are there. The third example I would like to give is that because of the COVID pandemic, you're working from home in many sectors, not in every sector, but in many sectors, right? So what does it mean for business and human rights, right? We talk about occupational health and safety, right? But occupational health and safety, we talk about in terms of the workspace. But if you're working from home, whether those parameters will also apply. What about work and family balance? Because you're working from home, so what are your office hours, right? Because I'm sure you can relate to this. The webinars are taking place midnight, early morning, any point of time. So how does it unfold? What are the human rights implications of this change that is there? In terms of going forward, I would say it is crucial that the governments create incentives for businesses, including small and medium-sized enterprises. And unless those incentives are created, we will not have a level playing field. It is good to have certain leaders as companies doing due diligence, but unless we have a critical mass and a majority of businesses doing meaningful human rights due diligence, we cannot really have effective implementation of UN guiding principles. So incentives are definitely needed. It could be public procurement, it could be tax rebates, it could be some preferential treatment in terms of finance, and that would also become relevant in the context of climate change, for instance. In addition to incentives, you also need binding rules. I think there is a growing consensus all over the world that the soft standards, voluntary standards are absolutely critical, but they alone will not be enough. So we need this, as everyone keeps talking about, a smart mix, right? So this smart mix is hardly smart at this particular point of time because there is no mix. So increasingly going forward, the relevance of binding legislation at the national level, at the regional level, at the international level is going to become the flavor, in my view. You also need to continue to push more raising of awareness and capacity building, because those challenges also remain there, especially when we're dealing with informal economy actors, especially when we're dealing with the small and medium-sized enterprises. So I think those issues are definitely there. Finally, very briefly, let me touch upon the future of the business and human rights agenda and what should Thailand or any other government should be doing going forward. I would say mandatory human rights due diligence is something that the government should seriously consider. European Commission is going to release the draft by the end of this year, and that will have implications not only for European companies, it will also have implications for Thai companies and other companies in Asia that have a footprint in Europe. And if that is the case, the question is, how do you create a level playing field? So it could be a level playing field if countries in Asia also start thinking and having those discussions, and they start adopting those binding rules at the domestic level as well. Otherwise, it is going to create unevenness and potential competitive disadvantage for some companies who are investing huge amount of resources in doing meaningful human rights due diligence, right? At the same time, we cannot treat all businesses in the same category. So you have multinationals, you have companies that have huge resources and a team of experts, but there are millions and millions of companies, and they are in a majority, who have no idea of what UN guiding principles are, right? So I think the future of business and humanist agenda, to make it more vibrant, is that when in the streets of Bangkok, those small shops, they are increasingly aware of not each and every principle of UNGPs, but the basic message, right? So can we create, let us say, a couple of basic messages for businesses as part of Pillar 2? Can we create a simple flyer in Thai language that can be circulated, that could be given to, let us say, every taxi driver? And I think that would really be quite critical going forward, in my view. Access to remedy and corporate accountability is also going to become more and more prominent, because that is an area where we have made least progress, in my view. So how do we improve access to remedy? Because let us face it, prevention is absolutely vital, but prevention is never foolproof. There will always be cases where prevention will fail, and there are adverse impacts. So how do you address those impacts in an effective manner? And how could we create an ecosystem of judicial as well as non-judicial remedial mechanisms working together? I think that would be absolutely vital. Let me conclude by flagging the new challenges that are emerging, whether these are about climate change, whether these are about, let us say, the migration which is happening, or forced migration in certain places because of the conflicts, because of other situations that may be there, or these could be related to new technologies, right? So I think business and human rights space, it has to keep evolving. Even the standards have to evolve. For instance, UN guiding principles don't talk about climate change. So how do you apply those standards or the spirit of it to the climate change, right? Do we need different approaches of due diligence about, let us say, future generations? Because the decisions we take today and don't take today will have impact on people who are not even born yet, right? So how do you do due diligence in relation to the rights of the people of future generation, right? So I think we need further innovation and further evolution of norms and standards as well. And of course, sometimes it could be that those standards are needed which are sector specific, right? Because they can provide more precise guidance and details. So I think the Thailand government, SEC and other actors in Thailand and elsewhere in ASEAN countries, they should keep working, brainstorming. And I think such events definitely provide some food for thought going forward, how to achieve this goal of creating basically an inclusive and sustainable society where the human rights of everyone are respected. So thank you very much once again for the opportunity. And I very much hope that this event is very constructive and provides some useful suggestions. Thank you.